Oh, cool. Oh, I think they can hear me. Must be a lag. There are 36 people waiting for me. Yeah. What's up, people? Welcome. Other Life, the greatest podcast on the internet, if you're interested in strange, interesting, very independent, wild, undomesticated intellectuals and creators who are extremely online. That's the new tagline for the podcast. Welcome. If it's your first time coming here, maybe you're here for the first time because you know Aella or you're a fan of Aella's. This is my podcast. I'm Justin Murphy. I do whatever I want. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do that. And also, folks, I have to remind you all, I know a handful of you are not yet subscribed to the actual podcast. Get the podcast on your phone. It's much easier to listen to. Wherever you get your podcast, you should be able to find the Other Life podcast. So before you forget, go and subscribe. You're not going to want to sit on YouTube for everything. It's just inconvenient. So today we're going to be talking with an interesting young woman named Aella. She's been on my radar for quite some time. I have been told many times that I am the male version of Aella, and that's a kind of irresistible thing to look into. So, of course, I've been paying close attention to Aella, and I think she's very cool. She's very interesting, smart person, and she has a very interesting background. And she's definitely in this camp of what I think of as sort of extremely online and very undomesticated, free-thinking people who seem to not really play by any of the rules, but find a way to basically think whatever they want and say whatever they want, and they make it work. And that's exactly the type of person that I'm most interested in, that I most admire. And that's a kind of recurring type of guest that I try to bring onto the podcast. So I think Aella totally fits into that. I think she's very smart and interesting, and I've never talked with her before. I don't know too much about her other than what's publicly available. So I'm just looking forward to getting to know her, understanding her story, and trying to understand how her mind works, and also understand how she has kind of developed the personal life and career, or whatever you want to call it, that she has developed. So I think she's with us now in the wings. So I think I will cut this introduction short. There's really not too much else to say. Oh, other than real quick, the LA event that I'm doing at the end of February, the Based Mansion, I literally have rented a mansion in LA, and it's actually already booked up. There are going to be more than 15 people sleeping in this house with me for 2 nights from February 28th. On that Friday night, there's going to be a live podcast show, a live show of the Other Life podcast and after party at a really cool venue that we've already booked also. It's at a really nice but kind of gritty family-owned dining hall. It's like some Danish family in the Highland Park neighborhood. We've booked it. It's a massive place. And yeah, we're going to do a live podcast, and then there might even be like a rapper afterwards. We're going to try to make it weird and cool. And there's going to be a surprise special guest for the podcast. And this is my first time trying to do a proper live public event. So I'm super pumped. There are tickets available online, but the Based Mansion, which is kind of going along with that, the weekend after from that night on, is already booked out. So yeah, I'm glad that came together. All right, let's not keep Aella waiting anymore. Oh, big shout out to my patrons. Also, thank you all for supporting what I'm doing. I would not be able to do this without you. So yeah, big thanks. Shout out. All right, Ben, let's bring her in, shall we? Aella, how's it going? Can you see me and hear me okay?
I can see you, and I think I can hear you. Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. How are you doing?
Fantastic. All right, hold on. I'm going to have to do this. Getting over strep throat.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah, I'm safe, but it's like that long tail where you're just like hacking for no particular reason for like a week afterwards. So
Yeah. Are you in pain? Is your throat in pain?
No, zero pain. Is this why it's like very pointless? I'm like, well, I wish that something were happening. Like there was some sort of like movement inside my throat. Like at least it hurts. Like no, something is moving. No, it's like pointless.
Hey, well, better than pain.
Yes.
So where are you calling in from today? You're in the Bay Area, is that right?
Yeah. In
Right on.
San Francisco area. I would say more, but I can't think of anything interesting to say about that.
No, that's cool. Do you live in like a shared house?
Yeah. I live in a rationalist house, or rather a house populated by people who like reading rationalist blogs.
Interesting. So it's all rationalists?
Yeah.
How many of
Yeah.
you?
I think like 11 of us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, this area is like heavily populated with rationalist houses. So there's like so many within a walking distance.
Is that right? And
One of
that's San
many.
Francisco, not Berkeley?
It is Berkeley.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of had you pegged at. So that there's like a neighborhood of rationalist houses, not just a rationalist house.
Yeah. There are
Interesting.
many. I think someone counted and there were 28 or something.
Really, all in like a 1 mile radius?
I think most of them are in this radius, and there's like a couple that are scattered out. It's sort of a hub.
That's interesting. And how long have you been living in that area?
About a year.
Okay. And do you love it?
I do not love it. I like it. It hits a lot of the things that I enjoy. There's like a dance-ness that I want more of in my life. That rationalists are not big on dance. I've been like trying to bring it into the rationalist sphere, which has been working a little bit. But I want more sort of physical movement.
Now, your blog is called Knowing Less. Is that a controversial opinion, or is that a controversial ethos that you represent in the rationalist sphere?
Yeah, I feel kind of bad because when I first was getting into rationality, it was like slightly after having done a whole bunch of acid, and I was like really not good at talking about it because I was like kind of one of those stereotypical burned out people who say crazy stuff and like expect it to make sense. And so that was like the clash with the rationalists at that time, where I would be like, but reality is an illusion, and they'd be like, come on, really? I don't blame them for that. Nowadays it's a little bit calmer because a lot of rationality sphere is starting to get interested in like Buddhist type thinking, and I'm like slightly less insane now, so that's good.
All right. So what is the best thing about living with rationalists, and what's the worst thing?
Best thing is that it's like not very fearful. Like if something happens, you just talk about it, and everybody's like absurdly, sometimes infuriatingly reasonable. Or they're like, "Oh well, everybody has their own perspective, and we're going to just explore this and like figure out a system to." It's like the most reasonable, calm, possible thing I could have lived in. And the worst thing is, I think, the dancing. I don't know. There's sort of this like vividness that's missing.
Too much Apollo, not enough Dionysus.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting. So, okay, I'd love to, if you wouldn't mind, unpack a little bit about how you've got up to this point, because you have I think quite a kind of interesting and rich personal history. And I won't make you kind of go through the whole story or whatever, but maybe just correct me if I'm wrong or if I have any false impressions. But from what I've gathered, I believe you were originally raised as a fundamentalist Christian. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Calvinist.
right. Okay. And then I think you did work some kind of normal jobs, and then you went into camming for a while.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And so then somehow you kind of magically landed in rationalist subcultures in California. So how did that all work?
How did that all work? Are you asking about like a general overview?
Maybe the gap you could fill in for me is the period between the camming and the extremely online rationalist provocateur living in the Bay Area with rationalists.
So there wasn't actually that much of a gap. It kind of like slowly streamlined into it because as a cam girl, you get a big audience, and I think I had like 15,000 Twitter followers from camming. Like roughly. So like a lot of what my original online presence was through porn, and I said a lot of dumb, controversial shit as a cam girl too. Very controversial in the cam girl community. Other cam girls didn't like me very much. It was like not very good, which is fine. I don't need to be liked by other cam girls that much. My coworker is right there. So yeah,
Right. So do you,
and
go.
then I started doing like surveys and questions on the cam girl and porn population first. And then once I quit camming, it sort of like just transformed after that.
And I think someone told me that, correct me if I'm wrong, but someone told me that you were one of the highest paid cam girls out there for a time.
Likely. It's really hard to know because to compare across cam stuff. But my highest earning month was $50,000. So, which and this was in 2013, I think. So the highest earning months nowadays are significantly higher than that. But at the time, that was probably one of the highest paid. Yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah, good for you. And are you still doing that or no?
No. Which is funny because this sort of setup, like I had to set up my webcam and I like cleaned out my background so I didn't look like a slob. And I was like, wow, this is very reminiscent. I haven't done this in years. That's kind of nice, actually.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, I was going to make an off-color joke, but I won't. Cool. So do you feel like in your experience with all of that, like what did you learn about human psychology and consumer behavior from being a cam girl? Yeah.
Yeah, quite a lot. That taught me mostly everything I know about marketing, which is not a ton, but most of it. But basically, like specifically, like male-female dynamic was really important. Like I've written an article, which maybe you've read, but like a big aspect of this is having men compete visibly in front of each other is really important. So instead of having like a one-on-one private dynamic with the girl, you get her attention by winning over the other men. And so this is like a really important aspect of cam girl psychology. That was really key. So it taught me a lot about that, about like competing for status in the eyes of some sort of like elevated person. Very important to play off of that.
So how did that carry over to your non-sexual kind of Twitter intellectual strategy?
It hasn't, mostly because I'm not monetizing my Twitter strategy that much. The cam girl strategy was based around maximizing money. Twitter strategy, I don't really have one. I'm kind of surprised that I'm doing so well because it's sort of like you probably experience this where you assume the way you think is default and then you're very surprised when other people react as though you're doing something strange. I have that all the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? Why did this get that many retweets? It's just like a normal thing.
I kind of find it hard to believe that someone as smart and clever as you really truly has no kind of mental model of strategic internet activity. So I'm not doubting your sincerity, but I want to pry a little bit more because I suspect that on the Twitter game, for instance, of course, it's not monetized, but it's also intrinsically gamified, right? It's intrinsically, you're trying to score points in some way, no matter how you see it. And of course, it's a game about status and influence and attention, whether you like it or not, right? Whether it's conscious or not. So I'm sure there must be, from your years of camming, there must be some lessons that carried over, some practices or ideas.
Likely, it's hard for me to identify like specific things that are in common with camming and Twitter, but stuff like, for example, I'm more likely to respond to you if you have a lot of Twitter followers. Sure. And that kind of, it's like not the most flattering thing to say because a lot of people really value, like being common people around. But like honestly, there's too many notifications. Like if more people follow you, more people are gonna see the thing I say it to you, right? And then like that's also probably something you might count as Twitter strategy, I think.
Now, how about, for instance, you do a lot of polls on Twitter, a lot. I think more than anyone I follow, you're always coming up with ideas for polls and posting polls. Is that not perhaps a kind of carryover from the idea that you learned in camming of making guys compete? Are you essentially kind of putting prompts out into the wild and then making thirsty men kind of respond intellectually this time, but maybe it has the same kind of effect?
I've actually never thought of it like that before. I mean, it's possible, but it's like hard for the polls to seem like competition, maybe, unless they translate to fights in the comments, in which case I would be on board. But I've never thought of it like that before. It's mostly just sheer curiosity. It does have the effect of like people have more attention on it, but I don't think it really has to do with competing with each other. I think that happens more in the comments. Yeah.
Right. So did you just make a ton of money camming and then you just had financial security for a while and then you're kind of just living off of it, or what's your main source of income now?
Right now, mainly savings and crypto.
Right on.
Worked with that crypto startup that did an ICO, which was very nice.
Oh, awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So what's that? Yeah, I know that you've recently launched a card game. We're definitely going to talk about that. There's a link to that in the description below. I have some questions about that, and we'll talk about that. In fact,
Sure.
I've even peppered into my questions that I've prepared some questions that I've stolen from your game.
Oh no!
I thought it was only fair. It's only fair, right? If you make a game that is literally about encouraging people to ask others the most awkward questions possible, figured it's fair play for me to pepper some into the conversation. So
I'm ready.
I'll do that randomly in a surprise way. So, okay, very cool. Very cool. So something that I was also kind of curious about is, because I did watch or read some of the stuff that you put out before this, and on YouTube in particular, there's not much of you, but there are some things, and I actually thought they had relatively low views. I thought they were actually quite interesting to watch. Maybe they both, I think, deserve more views. There was one clip about camming where you talk about that, and then there's another one where you're literally tripping on acid. And I thought the little acid movie was really quite artful, and I really quite liked it. I was surprised that it only had a few thousand views, so people should check that out. I thought it was quite cute and cool.
Yeah. It's more viewed on Vimeo. There's a version uploaded there.
Oh, okay. Right on. And one of the things I wanted to ask you give an impression in your interview on camming that perhaps it's sort of the harm that comes from doing cam girl work is perhaps overestimated. Is that something that you think?
I think it's likely. But it depends on what you mean by overestimated. Like, is it culturally induced? Yes. And in that sense, it's not really real. I try and talk openly about the harms that do come with camming. I think that a lot of the people's like perception of it is like a lot more emotionally I'm using the word problematic than it is.
Okay. So what is the most difficult, painful, harmful part of camming?
Probably the lack of security. The variation in income is so high, and it's like very emotionally stressful. I never got used to it. I did 5 years, never got used to the fact that like 1 month I could be, like now I can pay all these bills, and then the other month I'm like, well, nothing happened.
Oh, so it's actually the financial volatility that is the worst thing about it?
For me, yeah. Like a lot of people don't like the like emotional labor that they have to do. I mostly stayed out of that aspect. But a lot of people have no issue with the compliments. Usually they don't get insulted. Usually that's like one of the common misconceptions.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. So people overestimate the amount of insult that one receives. That's interesting. Yes. I never heard financial volatility as a particular source of stress in camming. You would actually think that it's more stable. You think if you're good at it and you have a loyal audience, that it would be a relatively stable income path, but I guess not.
Well, there's a percentage of it that is stable, but most people get most of their income from 1 or 2 people, which is very not stable.
Oh, right, whales, right? Is that what they call them? I don't know if you would have ever had any reason to come across this weird fact, but I actually tried camming once in grad school. Yeah, I had this really stupid idea where I thought that maybe I could just. I had to do a lot of studying in grad school, obviously reading and stuff like that. So I'm like sitting in my room for long hours at a time. I had this kind of stupid idea that, what if I just try it? It's not that hard to get started. And I'll just have the camera on me. I'll be reading my books in my underwear, and I won't even pay that much attention to it. But if someone appears and they want to give me money to like take off my underwear, then I'll do it. But that's all I'm going to do pretty much. And the way I thought about it was, if no one wants to pay me for this, well, I'm just reading my books anyway. It's what I would be doing anyway. But maybe someone will want to give me a lot of money. Yeah, I did. I swear to God, I tried it. I tried it many times. No, I did not catch a whale. I did not catch a whale. I did not catch a whale. I did not even catch a tadpole. I got zero money for it, but I did honestly try it, and it was nice. It was a relatively low cost experiment. I mean, just basically tried it. Yeah, I also did try Rent Boy one time. That's a whole nother story. But I did make $600 on Rent Boy. I'm not kidding. I made a clear commitment to myself and my girlfriend at the time, my now wife. I said, I'm never going to do anything sexual, but maybe I could find some weird guy who just like wants something weird that is not sexual, like has some weird fetish that I can satisfy without actually doing anything sexual. And I actually did get one. I got a guy to pay me. Well, he took me out to dinner, first of all. Had a nice like steak dinner too. It was dope. And then yeah, Philly, yeah. And I gave him a fake name and everything. And he was an older man, not very, well, he was a nice guy, older man. And the way it basically ended out, it's a long story, but the way it basically ended was we ended up going into his hotel room upstairs. And no, and I don't want to laugh because it was actually a fairly touching experience. I basically, we negotiated a bit, and we lied down on the bed and I hugged him for about 45 minutes. Like we were kind of like, I was the big spoon. Yeah. He was like, well, I basically just put my arm around his waist for like 45 minutes, and we just lied there in silence, and that was it. And I left the hotel that night with $600 in cash. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really nice story.
It was definitely strange. It was definitely, I had some weird psychological, emotional dynamics going on, but nothing particularly bad. I mean, it was weird for sure. But I did kind of feel like I was just helping a guy and just kind of giving him some brotherly love is how I thought about it to myself, and $600 for less than an hour and a nice paid for steak dinner. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
So that was my only experience with Rent Boy. And I would say it was a winning experience.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Anyway,
I would do that.
Enough about me.
If anybody wants to pay me $600 an hour to hug them, I'm on it.
Yeah. Enough about me. Dad, I hope you're not listening to this. But hey, I was young, trying things out. So, okay. So, one thing I wanted to ask you is, since you do all these damn Twitter polls, personally, I'm not one for polls. No disrespect. I don't mind you doing them. I think it's an interesting thing you do. Whenever I see someone put out a poll, I never respond to it out of principle because I feel like,
oh, really?
Well, yeah. And it's no disrespect or anything. It's just more when I see it, I think this person doesn't really care about the answer to this question. They just want my attention and they want me to feed into their game. And I feel like if I answer their Twitter poll, I'm acknowledging them as like more powerful than me. I know this is super stupid, but that's how I think about it. And I'm like, I'm not wasting my time on your poll. You don't really want the answer. You just want attention and you just want votes. I'm not accusing you of that. What I was going to ask you, that's just my stupid way that I see it. What I was going to ask you is just from doing all of these polls, you must have this massive ethnographic database now of attitudes. Of course, it's not a representative sample, but it's still a sample. I'm curious, like, what have you learned? What are the big things you've learned from all of these polls?
Occasionally I get polls that surprise me. I've gotten pretty good at predicting what people are going to respond by this point. But people are more pro pain than I would expect. So there's a couple polls around like, would you, what was it? Oh yeah, would you experience like unconditional love for all of humanity if you could? And in my mind, it's like, obviously, yes. Obviously 98% of people are going to say yes to this. But no, I think the majority said no. Very weird. But usually I'm not that surprised at this point.
That's interesting. I mean, I can kind of rep the somewhat anti-rationalist kind of Catholic love of pain and suffering in this conversation. I have some sympathy for that kind of attitude. And I can imagine, I mean, I think one defensible way to understand that type of response that I do think is sensible and even rational to some degree is that you don't really get all the good unless you have some bad to give it meaning. I think that's kind of like a logical reality. So some people might be thinking that, right? If everyone just feels nothing but love for everyone else unconditionally, isn't that really kind of the evacuation of love in some sense?
Well, we're conflating, I think, love and pain here a bit. I think that it's possible to be in extreme pain when loving someone. I think love does not always feel pleasurable.
Sure. That's for sure. Okay. Interesting. So anything else
that I have learned?
Yeah.
I am always surprised by people predicting that I'm going to agree with them. So I often ask, like, do you think I support X? Do you support X? And then usually it's like people think that I think what they think. That's always surprising to me. Like, you should have figured it out by this point that I probably don't agree with you. It's amusing.
So, okay. So then what that means to me is that there's something systematic in perceptions about you that is incorrect. What is it about Aella that the world misunderstands? if there's a core dimension? Is there an underlying dimension that explains that variation?
I think it's going to be difficult for anybody to fully understand what it's like to do a massive amount of acid unless they have done it. That's probably like the biggest divide where I feel like not really there's a connection there. But people are usually pretty good at getting most of it. At least there's a niche of people somewhere. So like the libertarian thing, like there's always going to be someone who understands that. Or like the sex worker thing. Like I follow a bunch of pro sex worker stuff on Twitter, and I feel pretty solidarity in that.
Do you think that your background in Christian fundamentalism has carried through in any meaningful way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I suspect this would be the same for anybody who's like been part of a very, very strong belief system that's weird and then leaves it. Because like having the experience of changing your whole framework about reality quite strongly is, I think, very formative. And for me, it led to like a lot of distrust. I was like, okay, if I can have believed something so much and like experience Jesus and, you know, witness miracles, like all of this stuff that seemed to be very strong evidence for this framework, and have it be not true, that's just like, oh, that just eliminates a whole lot of other shit that people say. You know, it's very strong skepticism in that regard. But I think that's pretty common.
So how old were you when you exited Christian fundamentalism?
I lost my faith shortly before turning 19.
Oh, 19. Okay. So
Yeah.
really late. And until then, you had a quite sincere personal conviction?
Yeah. Yeah. I was 100% in.
Wow. And so what made you leave it?
Well, it was like realizing how much effort I had been putting into believing. So like I was raised with like a very rational type faith. My dad's a professional evangelical who goes around debating atheists, and like we were taught, you know, like the arguments for, you know, theology, and I memorized like 800 verses, but over the course of my childhood sort of deal. And so like I knew how everything worked, you know, and all of like whenever I would hear an argument against Christianity, I knew the answer for it. Like, oh, well, you just don't understand the context, or, you know, you need to read the original Greek, or actually that's not a contradiction because of XYZ. And so this was like kind of the response for all of these objections, which felt like sustainable. I was like, okay, I have reason to support what I'm believing. But when I lost my faith, it was like for a split second, I was able to step outside and see how much effort went into answering these objections. Like we had to kind of like twist our reasoning just a tiny bit, which is like, we do that all the time in small amounts and we consider that totally normal, but it was just the accumulation of how much like, okay, all right, okay, if we just twist this here, all right, now we've got a functioning belief system, voila. You know, and then once I realized I'd been doing that, I was like, oh, well, what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to make it work. Like, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. And were you experimenting with acid and things like that before this at all, or?
No.
So that had no role in this?
No, not at all. I lost my faith right before 2019, and I tried acid for the first time when I was 23, I think.
And did you go to college?
For 3 months, but I was too poor and they kicked me out.
Right on. And you were homeschooled, right?
Yeah.
So you're homeschooled, went to college for a little bit, but wasn't for you. So pretty much your whole life, you've kind of been jumping from kind of strange space to strange space. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah. And it's not for lack of trying to not be in a strange place. I consider my like current position as like a weird in the cracks kind of person to not be voluntary, because like growing up I was fed a very standard idea for what I was capable of and what I was supposed to be doing. Like I was supposed to be a housewife, you know, they told me I would go to college to basically meet a husband, was like explicitly fed to us. And I remember once I brought up to my mom, like, Mom, like, what if I don't want kids? And she like freaked out. She was not happy with that. She thought it was extremely selfish. So this is like the kind of world. And then once I lost my faith and got out into the world, it's like there was no idea what I should be doing and no education. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to find a minimum wage job and work that for the rest of my life. That's what I thought. That's what I like thought my capacity was and where my role was, to be just like a basic, like I'm going to move this gear over to this other place repeatedly. So it was only like repeatedly failing at actually sticking with society that I ended up where I am today.
But that can be a blessing, right? Do you feel like in retrospect, you know, it's really worked out well for you, it seems?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so thankful that I got kicked out of college and that I had one job I was fired from. So thankful for that.
All right, that's a lesson for you kids out there. You know, you might be getting rejected from some normal institution, but it might just be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
It might mean that you're in a way too good, too interesting for them, and your life's going to turn out better if you embrace it. That's cool.
Yeah. Don't go to college. Drop out. Quit your job.
Are your parents happy with how you've turned out as an adult?
No. I mean, they think I'm going to burn in hell for eternity, which is like very sad.
Ah.
I think that was like the one thing they wanted. They just wanted me to remain Christian, and they didn't really care what else I did. But so.
Or do you still talk, or?
Yeah, I talk with my mom mainly. I'm not so much with my dad. He's kind of a jerk. But my mom likes to pretend everything's fine, and we don't bring up any of the inappropriate things I have done.
Sure. Interesting. So, how kidding were you versus how serious were you when you said a few moments ago, yeah, kids drop out of college? You know, do you think the more serious way to put that is, do you think that too many people are kind of forcing themselves to try to live up to sort of normal institutions, and you think there probably should be in a more optimal equilibrium in society, there would be far more people like you, or even like me in a very, very different kind of way, basically just accepting that they don't fit into some institution and just embarking on some sort of wild, undomesticated path?
I mean, yes. Very obviously, yes. I don't know exactly what proportion should be, but it seems like very obvious that right now we just don't have other options for kids.
Well, as someone who has done this yourself in, a few different ways, and how old are you now?
28 almost.
28. Okay, cool. I mean, I know that people who watch this channel, there are a lot of people who in their early 20s, even I think some late teens. I'm curious for people who see themselves as this type of person, who kind of just feel like the normal institutions they just don't fit. But they're dealing with pressure from their parents or just pressure from social perceptions or whatever. In your experience of doing all these different things, do any particular rules of thumb or lessons stand out to you about how to do it, both effectively, but also with some amount of confidence and emotional stability?
I think I was probably very lucky. I'm not really sure how much of this is genetic or my being slightly autistic or something. But I think it was probably the homeschooling where I wasn't exposed to this weird culture of like social pressure from other kids. And so there's something that's like deviating or disagreeing with society is like not scary for me at all. And having people like push back against me, I don't experience that as really a negative thing. And I think that's like really important for my ability to do this, and have like emotional health. Like there's not really any rules built into the world in my brain in some way. And I think if you already think that way, then it's likely that it will be more easy for you to. But a lot of people don't really have the freedom to try and take risks like that. Like you said, society pressure or family or monetary. Like often if you're relying on your family for giving you money to do things, drop out of college. So you don't need them to pay for college. Don't do that. But
so you're a big proponent of don't go to college, I guess.
Well, for most people, I mean, I think some people like it because it's a structure. And if you do well with structure, I don't know, and then you have like a very clear, easy path, then go for it. But if not, then, fuck it.
You're a good writer. Did you have good homeschooling in writing, or do you think that that's just basically genetic? You're smart and gifted verbally.
Probably genetic. I've always been obsessed with reading books. I would read like a novel a day for maybe over 1,000 books as a kid.
Oh, right on.
So I think that really led to it.
Okay, now here's the really big question, though. If you had to fuck a cow, would it be dead or alive?
Dead.
Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did kind of think about this for a little bit, and I don't know. I might go with alive. I feel like I have a little bit of an emotional relationship with it. Like, I feel like, I don't know.
Be careful with the bestiality talk there.
Well, yeah, but here's the way I think about it. It's like, it's bestiality either way, but if you do it while the cow is dead, it's bestiality plus necrophilia. So I guess if you're going for like, you just want to maximize outrage, then that's the better one. But well, yeah, I guess if you do it when they're alive, it's bestiality and rape, I guess, unless you really develop rapport with the cow, and you can kind of make a case that the body language was asking for it or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Which is where the like not having to explicitly verbally consent to sex comes from. Very
Right.
important.
Yeah. I saw a tweet. I saw a pretty edgy tweet you put out the other day that said, you feel like men should not ask for explicit consent.
Well, technically, I said I find it more arousing when they don't. That's technically what I said. I did not say they should.
Okay. So when you write, this is probably the dimension on which you and I are most kind of tagged together on the internet or mentioned in the same sentence or whatever, is provocative tweets. And I'm a little curious, for you, is it a totally natural thing where you're just basically thinking what you think and you're writing tweets and people get, kind of shocked at them or whatever? Or have you kind of learned what pushes people's buttons and you kind of like it?
Definitely. I started out, yeah. I started out not really, like I said, not very aware of why people were reacting weird. But then I figured it out. And like, I know people don't like thinking about kids having sex or animals having sex or like weird stuff around slavery and consent. I don't know. There's like a whole spectrum of things where people like get upset, and those are great.
What's so weird about slavery?
I know, that was a big deal. Don't quote me on that. Excuse me.
All right, no worries.
I mean, have you found this? Is it deliberate on your part?
At this point, yeah, it's become pretty deliberate. It's just fun at this point. I mean, I guess we have a similar psychology in that regard. I also, I guess I'm generally and personally relatively invulnerable to social perception and pressure. Like knowing that a few hundred or a few thousand random people in the world like think something I said is naughty pretty much means nothing to me. It just has no effect on my feelings or whatever. And people do have very different temperaments in this regard. Some people, just that thought that 100 people are disliking them feels like explosively painful and anxious. I don't have that at all. So there's really no negative cost to me at all if I say something that large numbers of people don't like, other than family who like don't see this like I see it. And I do love my family and I do respect them and I do give that a certain amount of I give that its due weight. So at first it was kind of like pretty natural, organic. But then once I started to see, I think what people don't realize is that when you go through this rodeo once or twice of having a negative viral tweet, you learn so much about how the herd functions. You learn about what sets people off. And then you see really interesting patterns that you really wouldn't know about unless you go through this rodeo. Like one thing that's always struck me is that when it happens, the half of the viral negative attention is some kind of misunderstanding. It's just a logical misunderstanding of what I actually said, but it's so statistically clear in the data of all the incoming responses that it really kind of like uncovers certain sort of like unconscious mistakes or unconscious kind of logical and emotional tendencies. And I always find that very interesting and actually analytically rewarding, so like when you can craft that negative viral tweet and get a whole bunch of people upset, you learn this kind of like hidden contours of how the kind of system one normal kind of like human monkey brain works, because it comes out in regularities that you can perceive in the negative onslaught. And I kind of like that. I just find it very illuminating to see. It's a really cool learning experience, I think, too, if you can ruffle the feathers of the herd. So yeah, I've kind of like, and then I started getting into the kind of the science of it, like thinking about it like a social scientist and thinking about, can you actually reverse engineer like what are the components of a kind of negative viral tweet? And yeah, so I've kind of just become kind of fascinated by the whole puzzle.
Have you figured it out?
I think I figured out a few rules of thumb. Do you have any rules of thumb?
Well, I mean, doing one where people can like easily misinterpret it is a pretty good one, because that way you have a very easy defense, and then other people will make that defense, and then you get that interaction.
Right. One thing that I think I have observed that is a reliable thing that works is the actual flow of the sentences has to be jarring. It has to be unexpected. It's kind of like what Jonathan Haidt says about moral confounding, essentially. Like that's what I have found, that my tweets that have done the best in terms of negative virality have essentially been Jonathan Haidt moral confounding statements, where you started off thinking that thinking that the tweet is going to be about X and X is a good thing. And then the final part of it is actually, oh, this tweet is about Y and Y is a bad thing. And so it's that getting pulled into something good, feeling like, oh, I'm gonna retweet this or like this because I support it, and then the final bit of it is like something you find atrocious. That I think is what really gets people. So that's one thing, and then I think the other criteria is you want it to be like logically. It should be, you should be innocent logically, but it just sounds like you're supporting something really evil. So it's like if you look at it closely, like I'm not supporting Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not even getting down on Greta Thunberg. I'm not actually taking any position. It's just an if-then structure. It's a purely if-then structure. And whether you buy the premise or not is not actually said in the tweet. That's left up to whether you want to buy the premise or not. That I think tends to work really well, because what it can do is it can basically upset both sides of the debate or both sides of the political spectrum. And I think for you to really get that negative virality, you need something that where your position on it is ambiguous, but both sides can reasonably infer that you're thinking the bad thing.
Yeah. So they're statements.
Yeah. Do you have any insights into the logic of viral tweets?
No, that's probably not more than yours. I think I probably have put less thought into it. It's only been in maybe the last 2 months that I've had a couple tweets go like bad viral. And so I'm still kind of adjusting to figuring out if this is something I even want to try to encourage. But I'm particularly fond of tweets that pit like the same ideology against itself, which is, I think, very similar, if not the same thing that you were saying. Like one classic example is saying like Black people catcall more. And then you upset people who are very liberal, and then you say, well, this is like, you being upset about this is in fact an offense against Black culture, where this is considered like normal and really welcome, and you're trying to like put your white morality onto this culture, like whitewash it, right? And so it's like there's like two different arguments that kind of come together. I love those.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good example. Yeah. So, okay, what is your favorite dose of LSD? The amount, I mean, like what is the best amount?
It depends on how much I've been doing lately. If I've been doing it like regularly, then probably 250.
Let's say for someone who doesn't do it, generally, like what for the average, obvious, and we're not doctors, folks. This is not medicinal advice. It's not advice at all. Okay. But take it for what you want. For someone who maybe doesn't do a lot of drugs, but wants a proper LSD experience, what do you think is the best dose to have the optimal impact?
Man, I was really trying to build a calculator for a while. I was like trying to come up with like the correct calculation where you input the thing and it gives you.
Oh, that'd be cool.
But I forgot that I was doing that. But it really depends on a lot of things. If you've already done psychedelics before, like shrooms and ayahuasca or whatever, and you had a good experience, then you can probably bump up your LSD dose. If you haven't done any psychedelics whatsoever, probably start pretty low. I'm much more conservative on my recommendations nowadays than I used to be. If you've never done it before, I'd start with like maybe 50 micrograms and then like work up on 25 microgram increments. If you have tried psychedelics before, then maybe do something like 100 to 125.
And so for people who don't have such fine-grained control over it, one tab, do you think one tab generally, if someone's giving you a choice of like one tab or two tabs, or, you know, if that's what you're dealing with?
Well, I mean, tabs vary a lot. I think common tabs are between like 100 to 125, but I have seen 300 microgram tabs and 50 microgram tabs. So, I mean, if they're like the standard dosing, then probably if you've tried psychedelics before, I would take a tab. Or if you're like feeling extremely confident and positive in your scenario, like you're around friends who you trust and you feel really at peace, then try like a full tab, maybe even more than that if you are crazy. But if not, then I would go with half a tab.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Is
Yeah,
this fit with your?
done it a few times, but I never did any kind of like really epic dose. Just like I think I did one tab once, then I did one tab a second time. So like two, and it was like a proper trip. It was cool for sure,
Nice.
but a little too taxing. A little too taxing on the body. I think
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. It was awesome. It was really awesome. But I don't know. I'm kind of getting older now. I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe I don't need heavy drugs anymore. I'm a big fan of microdosing though.
Yeah.
I think microdosing LSD is basically one of the most amazing positive drug effects or drug uses I've ever had, and it seems to have almost no negative side effects, and it's amazing.
Do you track like mood or daisy dose stuff like that?
No, not really.
Mhm.
No, but I've had very good experiences microdosing. Really enjoy that, and I see no real negative side effects. I did enjoy the few times that I had a proper trip, but it's intense on the body. It's like like the come down, and like even the next day, you're kind of like you feel like you ran a marathon or something. No, you didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I had this one trip where it was like quite a strong dose. I don't remember. It's like 200 to 300 micrograms, something like that. And I was about an hour in when I just got hit with the flu, and it's like very confusing because like you're like, is this in my body? Is this part of the acid? Is it not? Like, am I dying? Always a very important possibility. It was not very fun. I just ended up like throwing up.
You ever mess with ketamine?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's pretty dope. I only tried that one time, actually, not that long ago. I thought it was pretty amazing, honestly. I kind of get the hype. I think I'm on the ketamine hype train.
So I'm glad it works for you. I'm personally don't get a lot out of it, but
Oh yeah, it was weird, but I thought it was like very relatively peaceful and not as crazy as LSD, and I liked that about it.
that does
Also,
seem true.
what's crazy about ketamine is you can do as much as you want. I couldn't believe this when the person who was hooking me up, I was doing it with her, and she kept saying like, "Yeah, you want some more? You want some more?" I was like, "Shouldn't we go slow? I don't want to get like, am I gonna get fucked up? Am I gonna have a hangover?" And she was pretty much, and I was high at this point. I was like pretty high at this point, and I remember the moment when she was like, "No, you can do as much as you want, and there are no negative side effects." And I had this like crazy eureka moment where I was like, "No way, that's not possible. Are you serious?" I was like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "How is that possible? A drug that you can do that's awesome that you can do basically as much as you want. That can't be possible." And I just remember being really freaked out in that moment. Like, this is a glitch in the matrix. That can't be true. But that's what she said. And this, folks, kids, this is not advice. I don't know if that's true. That's just what some girl told me. It's just what some girl told me. I it could be wrong. Don't ever make life decisions based on what I tell you. I'm just giving you my experiences. Yeah. So interesting. What else? So I had a few notes. I try to go pretty much off the cuff, but I try to have a few things just in case. We should talk a little bit about your game that you recently launched. Your
Oh
card game.
yeah.
This is, as far as I can tell, your kind of most recent big venture, and it's interesting. So the idea, as I understand it, is pretty simple. The game is called Asshole, and it's pretty much a deck of cards in this kind of genre that I think has become popular with Cards Against Humanity and these types of party games. It's a similar concept, right? It's basically just a collection of nicely printed cards that are colorful and basically give you prompts to ask your friends very difficult, weird questions at parties. Is that the idea?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I didn't even originally intend for it to be a game. It's mostly just people kept asking me, how do you play? When I would like bring out the cards. Just always, how do we play this? And I'm like, no, it's just a deck of questions. Like figure it, I don't know. Like it's how use it. I don't know. But because there was so much interest in like having a set of rules for it, then we like came up with some rules for it. So I guess
you were just doing this naturally for fun in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right
So
on.
I would go around to parties and as the aforementioned probable autism, I would be like, okay, I am at a party. Why am I here? I am here to talk to people. Why do I want to talk to people? I want to have a conversation that is novel, I think. And so I would go up to somebody and then we'd start talking and they'd be like, how's your day? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about how my day was. Like, let's like generate something. And anyway, I was like very kind of awkward about it. So I ended up writing down a bunch of questions on paper and I would just bring them around, and then I would go up to people and ask them. I would like do like survey data at parties, so I would go around like ask everybody the same question and then record their answers and then ask their prediction about other people's answers to the same question. It was just mostly, it was me and parties and data and questions. And then eventually people started asking me like, where can I buy a deck of these? I'd like to have these for myself. And then after enough people said that, I was like, okay, probably there's a product here. A lot of people would buy it. So then I got my fantastic co-founder, Rothgar, and we together have made the company, and it's been going great.
That's really cool. I want to hear a little bit more about what goes into this type of product. It's kind of an interesting category. Like, how did you manufacture it? How do you go about getting a manufacturer to make you a nice deck of cards?
Yeah, I mean, mostly we didn't really know what we were doing. We use my playing cards, I think, because you can order smaller deck sizes from them, or like smaller batches, because we wanted to iterate. So we only ordered 100 and then used them and then took a whole bunch of feedback and then iterated, and we're on our 3rd iteration of product right now, which seems to be good. Seems to be no more serious complaints with the way the product is structured.
And how do you do the packaging and shipping workflow? Is that all outsourced, or how does it work?
Yeah. So originally I was doing it in my bedroom along with Rothgar. We were just like physically putting the product into the packaging, and like I had handwritten notes for the first round. But it's really time consuming and it would take a while. And so we have it outsourced now to a company that we just ship the product directly to them, and then they take the orders and fulfill everything. And it's so much better. Thank God.
And I'm a little curious about the actual nitty gritty of this, because a lot of people I think in my audience are doing different types of creative ventures on the internet that are somewhat, economically driven. So was it difficult to find, first of all, I guess, you need a company to actually produce the cards that look nice, and then you need also to have the shipping and the packaging done. Was it hard to find these people and get that arranged, or was it relatively simple?
I don't actually remember how we found the packaging company, but we use the one that Cards Against Humanity made. We use Black Box for the shipping, and they've been very good. Maybe we Googled for it. I don't remember. But getting the manufacturer, we just basically Googled manufacturer playing cards, because there's a lot of companies that do. And I had already tried this before when I was a cam girl. I designed and made a deck of cam girl game cards to play on cam at one point. So I think I had actually used the same company. So I already had like a little bit of familiarity with the landscape. But just basically Google make card order lots,
Yeah. And were you pleased with the process? Was it harder than you thought, or easier than you thought, or what?
It wasn't that bad. Really, like the company part was harder. So they have to like register the company more in California and like get a PO box. I hate that shit.
Yeah.
That was worse.
Yeah, bureaucracy, man. Fuck the system. Do you are you too open with your financials? Like, could I ask what kind of revenue you're doing?
I actually don't know exactly how much money we've made. I think we've sold around 1,000 decks. And it's like, okay, it depends on like what we have, varying profit depending on where we're shipping to and like which thing you ordered from. So
cool. And so is this just a little side project for you, or do you see yourself going deeper and deeper into the product game?
I would like to go deeper. I am extremely lazy. This is a big issue here. So if I can figure out how to become a productive, normal human being, then yeah, we're going forward all the way. But right now I've been taking it like really slow, not pushing myself, doing a little bit of work here and there.
Interesting that you say you're lazy. You definitely give the impression of someone who's very productive and creative.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Well, I mean, you have a long track record of writing interesting things, doing interesting things, and you seem to, when you put your mind to something, it seems like you follow through on it. So yeah, you don't seem like lazy.
Thanks. I'm glad that the image of me is not a lazy one. But I'm super, I do not get a lot done every day.
Well, I think if you have money, then laziness is a virtue. I mean, good for you, right? I mean, that's how I think about it anyway. I mean, we like to valorize productivity, and definitely it's good to be productive. If you have goals, right? If you're working on something that is meaningful, then yeah, sure, get after it, work hard, and good for you. And that's admirable. But like enjoying life is good too. And if you have money, then just being a cool, relaxed person who's good to their friends and is in a happy mood on a daily basis and has that kind of extra buffer of mental and emotional resources just to be cool to people, to be nice to people, to support people, and have free time for people. I mean, that's like that's noble, you know. So I think if you're paying your bills and you have the money, then laziness is cool.
Yeah, I mostly just be like, what do I want to do today? What do I feel like doing today? And usually the answer is Team Fortress 2, or like bad tweets.
Is that a video game?
Yeah.
Right on. Do rationalist houses like play a lot of video games?
No. They try. They're much more into the being productive and saving the world thing than I am.
If you don't mind me asking, do you still not want to have kids?
I am interested in having kids. I'm not sure if I actually want kids or if everybody's told me that I will want kids so much that I've just like internalized it. I have no idea, but like I want to be in a position where I can have kids if I want to.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. What did you say a moment ago about the rationalist people you live with? They're all off doing super productive things, trying to save the world.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, this is one of the things maybe we deviate, and that there seems to be some sort of ambient moral pressure to be doing good in the world, which I do not have. I am happy doing zero good if I so feel like it. But a lot of them are like, how do we better like program this thing that will help people, or AI? A lot of AI talk.
Right. Yeah, Ben is asking if they're effective altruists. Generally, yes. Right. That's a very tightly overlapping.
Very overlapping. Yeah. Some of them here are into it. Some aren't.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of more with you on this one. I mean, in many ways, I'm a rationalist, but in many ways, I'm not. And I think the whole hyper productivity narratives that get wrapped around existential risks is kind of I mean, I get it, and it's smart and it's interesting, and I certainly wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. But personally, I'm like, yeah, probably not. I mean, I think it's just really easy for people who are really smart and brainy, it's really easy to cook up some kind of moral narrative in which your intelligence is also really, really important and ethically. And I think the track record of humans pretty much coming up with rather fantastical kind of background casings for what is essentially just a kind of intellectual fatuation is such a long and storied history. I think we're very, very, very good at creating epic moral backgrounds for what is essentially just interest in intellectual work. That I kind of don't trust it when I see it generally, personally. So
I do think that there's a lot of like. So I'm definitely like psychoanalyzing outside of my week here, so do not take this too seriously. But I suspect that at least some portion of this moral drive comes from like the sense of like dissatisfaction with themselves. Like I need to figure out what set of actions I can do that will finally make me a good person.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's often true. I've definitely known people like that. I mean, I definitely have something of a kind of hyper productivity narrative, and I am the kind of somewhat typical ambitious man in that regard. Like I do try to work as hard as I can, and probably obsessively and to a fault. But for me, I never really have convinced myself that it's because I need to save the world, or I'm going to save the world, or there's some sort of like real ethical, moral necessity for me to work on some particular problem. And failure to do that is like neglecting this most crucial research agenda. Like I think you can be very productive if you want to, but I tend to think that you should probably acknowledge that the ultimate driver of that is your temperament and your own, kind of what you said, Aella, like that it's essentially you're scratching an itch that's essentially inside of you. But be that as it may, does this cause problems for you in your social groups in the rationalist community?
I mean, I like the rest of them so much. I know I shit on the rationalist community because like, they do have issues, but like every time I leave, I'm like, the outside world is like not good. It's just because they're so good at thinking here. You know, not that they don't have their issues or or have moral standards that come out of personal flaws, but just they're so reasonable. And you can say anything, any thought, and they will genuinely engage with it. And so I don't remember where I was going with that. But I love it.
No, it's okay. Is it weird or difficult being, if you don't mind me saying, I don't mean anything by this, but like an attractive girl, hot girl, whatever, in a community that's not exactly known for having a lot of hot girls?
Is there anything weird? Um, I I mean, sometimes I experience like dynamics if I go to a party where I can feel it. Like, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of going somewhere, but like there's something about your appearance that like has an impact on other people. But usually it's pretty good, mainly because most people in the community are not great at pursuing women.
Right.
Which is good, but they tend to be very, straightforward about it. So I mean, sometimes I have people be like, just like no bleed up whatsoever. They send me a message like, date? And I'm like, okay, thank you for asking. Probably not, but I appreciate it. And I like that sort of attitude.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So what type of style do you like in this context? What do you generally respond positively to?
Straightforwardness.
But the person who DMs you date ? Too straightforward?
Well, I mean, usually they say slightly more words than that. But no, I have no issue with that. I like that. And I respect it, because it's like the thing that I really hate are people who don't ask, but like kind of are putting them in the position where they're like hoping that I pick up that they're trying to kind of ask me. I hate that shit more than anything else. And I understand why they do it. But like for me personally, it's like, don't make me have to do this weird guessing game. And then sometimes I directly approach it. I'm like, are you interested in me? Like, because if so, I don't want to do anything. And they're like, oh, no. They deny it. I'm like, I hate the plausible deniability. Just come out, be like, hey, I'm interested in you. And then if they do that, we address it and it's fine. And then we move on.
Very interesting. So, all right. So you think you might go into more kind of product design type projects? I'm curious, like, do you have any ideas on the back burner that you might be working on next? Like what's next for Aella?
Book.
Oh, cool.
If I can do it.
So tell me about it. Oh, is this, you're doing Enlightenment research? Is this what you're referring to? Oh yeah, great.
I mean, it would be at least partially about that. I doubt the entire book would be about
great. So I'd love to hear more about it if you want to tell us.
Yeah. So mainly I started out just doing long form, about an hour each, 45 minutes, interviews with people who claimed to be enlightened. And then as I did that, I developed a set of questions. I have Asperger's. I'm looking at the chat. I probably have Asperger's. I haven't been diagnosed. Anyway, yeah, so I did a whole bunch of interviews, and then after that I did a large survey, which has turned out to not really tell me that much. But basically mapping out like the variety of experiences that people are talking about when they say the word enlightened or awakened or stream entry or whatever. And so now I have like a list of different like bins that I'm trying to put people in.
Interesting. I've met exactly one person in my life who said that they're enlightened.
That they claim to be enlightened, or you consider them to be enlightened?
No, they claim to be enlightened. I've only ever met one person who self-defined themselves as an enlightened person, an officially enlightened person from meditating like a whole lot over like 20 years or whatever. And honestly, the dude is pretty based. I kind of believe him.
Wait, I have an embarrassing question.
Yeah.
Which is, what does the word based mean?
Oh, well, I guess I have my own usage of it. I mean, the essential definition is associated with Lil B, the based god. He's a rapper. He really put this word on the map. He put this word on the map. So if you're interested in the original provenance, then the definition of based would be pretty much like grounded, humble, right? Based as in feet on the base, feet on the ground. You know what's important, and you're humble and grounded.
Okay, cool.
Then it gets a bit co-opted by some right-wing people. They have this opposition in kind of the frog Twitter right-wing internet land. They will talk about this distinction between blue-pilled and cringe on the one hand, and based and red-pilled on the other hand. And so it gets kind of co-opted a little bit in this kind of slightly right-wing kind of ideological tenor. And then I'm not a right winger, but I'm just on certain dimensions. I'm more right wing than the typical like public vocal leftist at this moment. So because I'm somewhat right wing on some of those dimensions as a general leftist, I took up this term based to kind of be a combination of Lil B, the base god, and Frog Twitter. So to me, when I say it, it pretty much means like just humble, based, grounded, down to earth, real, honest. To me, it kind of, if there's one synonym for it, it's kind of like just wildly honest, kind of recklessly. It's like recklessly honest. To me, that is a kind of being radically down to earth and grounded and humble, but also it's like intrinsically edgy, right? So that's going to be kind of intrinsically kind of like inconsistent with kind of like I got normal kind of institutional norms and political correctness and all that. So that's a bit of a long-winded explanation of based, but there you have it.
Cool. I don't remember what you used the word to describe now. So.
Yeah, sorry. What did I even? Do you remember what I asked her? Oh yeah, we were talking about enlightened people. Oh yeah, and I was just saying the dude I met. Actually, I can shout him out. He's on Twitter. His name's the JMO. A real cool dude in England. In fact, he'd probably do an interview with you if you wanted.
Yeah.
Are you still taking people? He's cool. He's real cool. He's an interesting dude in England. I hung out with him a couple times. He's like a very interesting, smart, educated kind of hacker type guy. He made money, I think, on crypto also, and now is just kind of like doing his own thing. Very independent, cool dude. But anyway, I met him, and he told me straight up that he's legit enlightened from just a very, very long time of meditating. And honestly, I really enjoyed talking with him. I thought he was really cool and smart, and I liked him. And so I was kind of inclined to believe him. I thought believe him. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it means to be enlightened at all.
Yeah, me neither.
But based on your current research, what's going on with this? What is the Aella theory of what are these people really saying? What does it mean to be enlightened?
Well, I can list you the bins I've got developed right now, if you're interested.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're perfect. This is like kind of a rough sense of me trying to guess like what the clusters seem to be. But so the first one's material and like I've got names for them, which may change. We have material enlightenment, which are usually people who report very non-spiritual awakenings. So the sense of like realizing that you're just like a meme gene factory, usually quote a sense of like large space, like the universe is big and I am small, feeling like you really get your place in evolution sort of thing. So this is very profound for people. So I consider this material enlightenment. And there's skill-based enlightenment. So the people for whom their primary thing that they report are things that they've learned that they can do with their brain. So like slowing down time or like changing their heartbeat or like experiencing like concentration in this fingertip for 3 hours, stuff like that. So it's basically like training your brain to do a lot of crazy stuff. And then there is mental health enlightenment. So a lot of people consider their enlightenment to have like figured out how to live life in a way that's extremely fulfilling for them. Usually we'll say that this is incompatible with mental health issues. So the idea is if you have this kind of enlightenment, you have solved all of your mental health issues. Usually very integrated, very aligned, very focused, they get things done without having chatter in their brain. And then there is standard, excuse me, standard enlightenment, which is like the very traditional kind. I think it's the Jed McKenna kind. I tried to read one of his books once, but it's very like spiritual enlightenment, the sense of the divine, like there's nowhere to go because we're already here, sort of like realizing your true self, no self, ego death usually falls into this very strongly. And then there's traditional enlightenment, which I understand the least because I only talked to one person who seems to be in this category, but seems to have like very strong beliefs in like nirvana and reincarnation in the karma cycle, and places a lot of importance on like doing the traditionally good things, a lot of importance on ethics and love, and like the correct rules for behavior. And then the last kind of enlightenment is pleasure enlightenment. So some people consider enlightenment to be like hitting a max amount of just joy on a constant basis. So they've wire-headed themselves out, nirvana, bliss, love, all this stuff going on. Those are the 6.
Nice. Yeah, well, that's cool because the traditional enlightenment one that you said you have very few cases of, I think that would be my buddy in England. So I think when we're done, I'll mention him in a tweet with you, and you can follow it up if you want or not.
I would be very interested in talking.
I think he's on that
Cool.
on that vibe. So is this all people who self-identify as enlightened, that's your selection criteria?
A lot of them don't self-identify as enlightened. I'm using the word enlightened as like a kind of a catch-all for like the woo thing that your face does when you realize what you are. I don't know. But a lot of people will say awakened or stream entry. A lot of people will refuse to have a label at all, despite responding to my interviews. And describing a lot of the same things. I'll be like, no, I'm not enlightened, I'm not awakened, I'm not anything. Yet I have these incredible mystical experiences where like I realize that all is one and all this stuff. So really wide variation.
Yeah, interesting. So are you enlightened? No?
I would have achieved, I guess, standard enlightenment by this definition.
Okay.
Or not enlightenment by other definitions. It doesn't really matter.
Interesting. So you do identify as standard enlightenment in that model. Interesting.
It describes my experiences pretty well.
Yeah. And is that largely from the acid?
Yeah.
Wow. You know how people who meditate, they have some sort of rule of thumb for how much meditation you have to do to be enlightened? Is there a similar rule of thumb for how much acid you have to do to be enlightened?
I don't know. I think it's like really your mileage varies.
You should map that out. You should get some of your rationalist homies to do some data analysis on that. That would be
funny.
That'd be think piece of the year. Let's call up Gwern or whatever. Have him like tell us. I want to know exactly how much LSD I have to do to reach enlightenment. I'll do it.
I really wish it worked like that.
You don't think there's got to be some somewhat standard, there's got to be some sort of causal inference on average how much acid you need to do.
When I first started doing acid and I was having all these like really incredible experiences, I was like, oh, this is just the thing that people have when they're on acid. And then I fed acid to a lot of other people irresponsibly, and they did not have the same reaction I did. So it's very possible that many other people could do the same amount that I did and not get anywhere. Whereas meditation might work for them a lot better. I really have no idea.
Man, I got a bad feeling after this interview, you're going to get some crazy DMs from people claiming to be enlightened, people watching my channel.
Sure.
I wonder how many people are going to DM you telling you that they're like pleasure enlightened and they have like.
I would be curious. Yeah. I have a Discord for people who are one of these things. So.
Oh, cool. So you put all these enlightened people into a basket and you have them enlighten each other. Is it just for the research purposes, or is there a larger kind of community building aspect to it?
I'm mostly interested in the research, but if the community comes secondarily, I would be interested. The thing that got me into this in itself was hearing like highly respected teachers dissing each other, being like, oh, they don't understand, they're really misled. And so if like really highly respected teachers are having disagreements, I want to see like those disagreements worked out. And so I'm trying to replicate this a little bit with this Discord chat, just to see if they like combat each other with their disagreements. So far, it's been really nice. They've been so nice to each other. I'm so mad, but I shouldn't be complaining.
That's really cool. So have you, from your research so far, have you extracted any particular patterns or insights on what is correlated with enlightenment?
No,
not yet.
People seem to report a higher sense of well-being almost universally. That seems to be the most agreed upon thing. So agreement with the statement like I am at peace, for example, it's very strong.
Based. Very nice. Well, Aella, I don't want to abuse your time. I'm sure you have many interesting rationalist dates to go on and games to create and a book to write. So I'm just kind of curious, is there anything else that maybe my audience might be especially interested in that we did not get to address, or anything you thought I would ask you about that I didn't? Ben, do you have any? It's kind of on pause. Yeah, the thing is, it's really hard to think of good categories. Yeah. I'll bring it back. Due to popular demand, I will bring it back eventually, but it's on pause, unfortunately. Do you have any questions for Aella? You think you're Aspie, but you're not diagnosed. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. A lot of people tell me I'm Aspie, which is where I get my evidence. So,
do you know there's this popular idea that women on the internet have it harder, right? Like if you're a public figure on Twitter, it's harder to be a woman because you get threats and harassment.
That's what they say.
Do you agree with this, or do you think that's baloney?
I don't know. I think I seem to be pretty insensitive to identity-based harassment, as in if it happens, I don't really notice it or process it as being like related to my gender. I just don't really process things as related to my gender, I think, unless it's very clearly related to my gender. So I just don't have that experience.
Do you observe in other women in particular, perhaps even especially younger women, who maybe have interesting ideas, they have creative projects, they have stuff to offer the world, but because they are affected by, what people say about them or these fears or anxieties around being a woman on the internet? Do you observe anything in other women that you think they really misunderstand, or they're getting wrong, or that they're overestimating or underestimating, that is kind of holding them back? And I ask because you're, someone who's clearly, I think, been quite good at just basically ignoring the haters and doing your own thing to a lot of success.
Yeah. I mean, this is another thing I write about a lot, is like getting rid of cultural narratives around, especially trauma. But I think usually if you're told that you should expect to have this bad thing happen to you, that you're more likely to interpret things through the lens of that bad thing. And I think that this is like often not useful. I think like I like that I don't interpret things through the lens of gender, because it just doesn't bother me anymore. Like I don't think about it. And it seems like a lot healthier of a way to be. And so just don't buy into like culture telling you that you should be upset about a thing, and then you should have a better time, I hope.
Right on. Do you think there are any particular areas of research or intellectual exploration that are currently being underexplored, that are particularly rife terrain to be tilled by interesting potential internet provocateurs?
I'm very curious about IQ and genetics, and also eugenics.
Say more.
I'm mostly just curious to see more research on and discussion on it in general that isn't a dumpster fire, because it's either like full racists trying to like use it to do their racist things, or people reacting to what they suspect to be racist doing the racist things. And there's not like a lot of room for people to actually be doing interesting research.
Yeah, I think you're right that eugenics is a really hot button, sort of ignored terrain, because it's sort of latent in so much that is very popular right now. Like I always talk about this with respect to abortion. Like there's so many kind of actually relatively educated and intelligent women out there, especially younger women, who, especially obviously left-wing women, who are adamantly pro-abortion and will wring their hands if you say anything about eugenics. And
yeah,
it to me that's kind of like pedophilia and necrophilia. This is one of those kind of explosive kind of knots in the public culture. It's kind of brushed under the rug by everyone, and it's really morally charged. People freak out if you get anywhere near it,
which I don't get.
Yeah,
this is maybe like one of the strongest topics where I just am so disconnected from public discourse, because like someone was like, I think someone was talking about eugenics at one point, and I was like, what is that? And they just explained, well, and I was like, oh, that seems like obviously good. We should be doing eugenics. Like, what is the big deal? And then some people would freak out about it and be like, what are you? I just like, I really don't understand why people are so up in arms about this. Let's eugenics everything.
Yeah, Ben just said it's the stigma from the Nazis.
Right.
I definitely think the
Fucking
word
Nazis.
eugenics has this particular charge. Like that word has a charge that comes from associations with the Nazis, for sure. I think that's true. I mean, I don't think it's that really. I don't think it's a very interesting debate. So I won't really like pose it as a debate. But I kind of do rep a little bit the anti-eugenic perspective in that. I mean, if you're genuinely confused about the underlying logic, that I think makes sense, I could recapitulate that for you. I think that the basic insight that makes sense out of it is that there is this way in which human rationality can lead to consequences that are horrifying. It's basically encoded, as I'm sure you probably know, right, in Christianity quite well. It's right. It's like the Faustian bargain. It's like you can have a lot if you make a bargain with the devil. You can have a whole lot, but it's going to bite you in the ass in some way that you don't expect down the line.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of truth to that. That's not just superstition, and it's not just kind of anti-intellectualism. I do think that there's a fairly justified fear that look, this could be the great filter, right? This is a common idea even in the rationalist sphere. I like to basically, when I disagree with rationalist ideas, I try to do it with rationalist ideas, because I think that just works the best and makes most sense to people who are rationalists. You know, the whole idea of the great filter, a very plausible, rational, possible answer to the great filter question is that pretty much societies become overly rational. They become too civilized. They become too complex, too good at technology, too good at what the Frankfurt School would call instrumental rationality. And at a certain point, it could just be the case that any advanced society becomes so instrumentally rational that it offs itself in some way that's really consistent. And I don't think that's outlandish. I don't think that's implausible. And I think the Christian kind of anti-rational aspects of Christianity that basically say, you know, we really need to put a ceiling on the application of rationality to human life. I think it's a kind of encoded ancient traditional wisdom that is pretty much trying to prevent that type of long-term civilizational problem, is how I think about it.
Yeah, I think that this is likely. I think this is like a pretty good argument. There's just like no way that any one of our minds can like comprehend the side effects of injecting rationality into a culture that did not evolve for it. Seems legit. I mean, I generally still prefer movement towards increased rationality, and then my philosophy is like throw it in that direction, then we'll work out the kinks afterwards.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Well, this was really fun, Aella. It was good to get to know you in person. You've been on my radar for a long time. We've interacted here and there on Twitter, but I really didn't know too much about you or what you were like. And so this has been fun and edifying, and thank you for coming on to hang out with me.
It's a good note to end on, eugenics.
yeah, sure. And cool. Thanks for talking to me, especially with your strep throat. Thanks for soldiering through.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Good luck with all of your endeavors. I'll see you around the interwebs.
All right. Bye-bye.
Later. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out. If you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. That was fun. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. I think she was really cool, really smart, and easy to talk to. A lot of interesting insights in there too. So yeah, also don't forget, subscribe to the podcast where you get your podcasts. You probably didn't catch all of this on YouTube because it's hard to watch stuff on your computer, but all of these talks go to the podcast, which you can find wherever you get your podcast pretty much. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe on your phone too. I'm going to be in LA for the 1 week around February 28th. I'll be there for a few days before and then a few days after. I'm going to have a live podcast show. So if you're in the area of LA, definitely come out Friday night. It's going to be awesome. I think it's my first time doing this type of fairly big event, fairly public event that's actually organized instead of just small meetups that I've done. So yeah, there's going to be a surprise special guest at the live podcast. Ben's coming out with me. I'm bringing Ben for the whole thing. And then after the live show on Friday, February 28th in LA, I've literally rented a mansion and it's already paid up, and there's going to be like 15 to 20 people sleeping there. And so if you think rationalist houses in Berkeley are interesting, wait until you see Based Mansion, which it's not even going to be rationalists. It's going to be probably some rationalists and then some, who knows? I really have no clue. Well, I have some clue. I did some vetting. I'm not going to let in anyone, but I have a pretty open mind about who I'm letting in. Pretty much, I just asked them. The only requirement to be in Based Mansion was they have to be working on something interesting. They have to have some kind of real project that they're working on that's interesting, and they have to have a real name. And I have to be able to Google them and confirm that they're not like a wanted murderer. But if they pass those tests, I pretty much gave them a spot, and it's already filled up, unfortunately. So no more applications, and it's going to be dope. I'm really excited, and I'm going to be live streaming and shit too. We're going to make videos, and we're probably going to on the Saturday we're going to do a mini conference, and people will give talks, and that'll probably all be live streamed. So on Saturday, February 29th, You can hang out at Based Mansion through the internet with us if you want. It's going to be dope. I'm really excited. This is my first foray into events, like proper events. And I have no goals financially. I just want to break even. That's my only goal for that. And other than that, I just want to make it awesome. I just want to make it super fun, interesting. I want to give everyone a super good time. And I want everyone to walk away from the weekend saying like, damn, that was fucking weird and awesome. You know, I don't want to do some sort of bourgeois thing that's kind of normal and posh and, you know, impressive and whatever, glossy, but is kind of like normal. I want to do something truly weird and truly unpredictable. That's really, you know, I've always been like this. I've always been into DIY stuff. I always have been. I just kind of think that's where real culture is essentially brewed up. It's never in the kind of glitzy glam of kind of high status spaces. It's always in weird DIY, eccentric, slightly gritty, off color spaces and experiments. That's always where my heart has been from when I was a kid to today. You know, I suppressed it for a little while when I was in academia, but it's just kind of this is just the return of the repressed. It's all coming back, and I'm reverting to my true nature. DIY forever, motherfuckers. All right, thanks, folks. Thanks for hanging out. I think that's all for now. Thank you to my patrons. Big shout out to my patrons. Always try to give them a shout out. I'm very grateful. Oh, and by the way, indiethinkers.org is kicking off. I am amazed to tell you and just super happy and grateful and excited, super excited that it's growing, man. This little startup idea experiment that I had where I'm pretty much trying to create a valuable, supportive community environment with learning resources and community network effects and live virtual conferences and intellectual community development. It seems to be working. People seem to like it. We have like 36 members now, like active paying members. And I'm floored. I'm so excited that people seem to be into it. Seems to be growing. And I'm pretty sure that now, at least for the foreseeable future, I'm all in on this. I'm going to be giving my heart and soul to making indiethinkers.org grow, making it increasingly valuable, and building up everything that's in there and that it's able to do. It's going to be a challenge. I'm daunted. I've never really built a proper kind of internet startup thing, and that's essentially how I'm seeing it. And so it's daunting and it's challenging and it's a lot of work, but I'm really into it. I feel good about it. And yeah, so it's invitation only at the moment because I'm trying to do it slowly. It's just me. It's a solo operation, so I don't want to like allow in hundreds of people and not be able to manage it or not be able to respond to people and give people what they need. So it's invite only. I'm doing it very slowly, but if you're interested in, you know, developing an independent intellectual life on the internet and you need help and you want community and you want to talk with other people that are doing that and learn how other people are doing that and find collaborators and all of that, then check out indiethinkers.org. You can request an invite and I'll get back to you. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Very happy with that. And shout out to all my people in indiethinkers.org. It's going to be dope. It already is, I think. Still a lot of work to do. I have a lot of ideas for how to make it better. And there's a lot that can be done to make it better for sure. And I have a roadmap. I can only do so much as a solo person, but I'm actually talking possibly to some people about maybe bringing on a co-founder, maybe not, because I really want to make it work. I really want to do it the right way, whatever that takes, whatever that's going to look like, I'll do it. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Otherwise, thank you folks. Thanks for hanging out with me. Always happy to do this. Like hanging out with you. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Big thanks to my patrons. Shout out to indiethinkers.org. And that's a wrap, I think. All right. Other Life Podcast, the greatest podcast on the internet. If you're interested in crazy, eccentric, undomesticated geniuses and wackos. My friend Katya said that I'm the Oprah of internet wackos. And I really appreciate that. Thanks, Katya. All right. Later, folks.